Welcome to the Startup Grind.
We're neighbors. And longtime friends. Exactly. Okay, hi kids, how are ya? It's great to see you. Thank you, David. And thank you for having us. This is really exciting. Hi, Robert. Well, we know some of you in the audience, which is thrilling. And Kelly and I have known each other for a while. And we both have mutual respect and admiration. I'm going to speak for Kelly.
Of course I do.
Yeah. But really, when David called and said, we'd like you to do this, and I said, well, who am I interviewing? He said, Kelly Rossman. I'm like, well, I'm in. I'm in.
That was easy.
It was easy.
So you want a small world story? I was speaking at Kalamazoo College last week about crisis communications in a class of 60 or 70 kids, two different classes. And this young man comes up afterwards and he says, my mom said to say hi. I said, what's your name? And he said, Brock Rosinski, Sherry's son. So he's like, I texted my mom while you were here. And she said, go say hi.
I did.
And then we sent a selfie to her to prove that we really did meet.
That's right.
Yep.
You did. Right on Twitter. And like, I don't know how many likes it got. A lot of retweets. It was good.
Proving that we really don't have a life. Sure.
Well, we actually did an interview much like this back maybe 15 years ago with Mary Ellen Sheets from 2 Men in a Truck, and Theda Rudd, whose husband had passed away, and she ended up running like 23 Burger Kings. And McDonald's. And so it's so interesting to hear her story. I'm really glad to be able to share it with you today, and to really but the questions that David and I talked about were, and some of them they're really peeling back the layers on some of this. So I'm excited to hear your answers about this too. We've kind of decided to break it up in a few parts. So first, getting to know you, talking about who you were as a child, kind of a young woman, and how your childhood played into it. And then the early years of Rossman. And then how it's now Rossman Truscott, a little bit about that.
I like that, Rossman Truscott. I should switch up the name.
Tell Johnny, tell JT. And then a little bit about Female Founders Month and how just looking at women in general in leadership positions. And then I just have some miscellaneous questions. Okay? All right.
And then they get to ask questions.
Yeah, you definitely get to ask some questions too. So why don't we, talk about your early childhood. Like, what was it like to be you as a young girl? Did you have some really powerful female role models in your life, or your dad, or what was it?
Well, there were, when I was growing up, very few women were in business, and those who were, I did not know. But my dad was a reporter and a columnist, first when I was younger in Portland, Oregon, and then in Detroit. He was a columnist at the Detroit Free Press. And I always expected to follow in his footsteps as a journalist. And when I was a kid, in fact, it wasn't until I saw some of the questions, I had forgotten all about this. I did a neighborhood newsletter. That was my deal. Now, this is before computers, so, a typewriter. And then I would mimeograph it and sell it for a nickel to my neighbors. And that lasted 3 weeks. So I was being an entrepreneur before being an entrepreneur was hip and cool. But that's, writing and then being a business person, I guess, was in my future.
Yeah,
sooner than I thought.
Started like real young.
But I knew, in fact, there was only one working woman who was not a teacher that I knew. She was our next door neighbor, and all the moms in the neighborhood sort of looked down on her because she worked.
Right.
And she worked because she was a divorced mom, and she probably had to work. But we didn't know that. We just, the kids didn't. I'm sure the other moms did, but being a businesswoman was not held in high esteem at all. And it was, it was in a way somewhat scandalous. Probably.
Right,
even
working
though she was
in general,
banking,
right?
It doesn't really sound all that scandalous.
No, working in general.
Right, that was in the day. I grew up in the 60s. That was in the day where most moms were home baking cookies and drinking coffee at each other's houses and smoking. So you can see times have really changed a little bit.
Yeah. And then what about high school? What things did you do in high school did you continue with your writing, your newspaper?
You know, I went to 3 different high schools. So I started in Portland, Oregon, and then we moved out to Michigan, and we lived in St. Clair Shores for a year, and then moved to Detroit. So I went to 3 different high schools, and I think that moving that much, and my husband, who's here, has a very similar background where you've gone to a lot of different schools. It forces you to be gregarious. And so I do think that being gregarious is part of what it is I do now. But, you know, I like to hang out and schmooze with people, and I like to write. I always like to write, but I didn't think of it as a marketable skill. I just thought that was something fun to do.
So being gregarious and being able to adapt to change, are those some of the childhood lessons that you think you learned?
Yeah, I think so. I think being comfortable walking into a room where you don't know anybody and everybody else knows each other really well. The high school I ultimately graduated from is one of those schools, much like the Lansing area, where every kid went to grade school together. They've known each other since kindergarten, and you're the new kid.
Right.
And, you know, I wasn't cute or hip or athletic or any of those things that help, so I had to be funny and gregarious. And you learn to walk into rooms where you don't know anybody and make friends. And I think it's a life lesson. I don't recommend it for everybody, because I don't know how many of you have moved a lot when you're a kid, but it's not all that fun. And I think it's harder for boys than it is for girls. But it's, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself, and you also learn about people. You learn very quickly to recognize shallow.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
But
I actually like the shallow people. I want to make sure you know that. Gravitate toward them, but you know, you learn who they are.
But your humor, see, even now, I mean, your humor it's carried with you the whole way, and that's what makes you so likable.
Think about how boring would life be, really, if you didn't laugh, especially at yourself. I mean, when you think about it,
Right.
what would life be without humor?
You are so
Oh my
funny.
God, deadly.
Seriously.
All right.
So from high school then to college, did you have any businesses in college?
No, but I worked. I took a somewhat different path. When I graduated from high school, I went to Europe for about 6 months, and then I came back, and all my friends had gone off to college. And so I went to Macomb Community College, and I worked sometimes I worked at night, and I raced to get through college so I could catch up with the kids I went to school with. And then I transferred to Wayne, and I put myself through school. I didn't borrow money from anybody. My parents were not, you know, my dad's a journalist. I don't make any money, so he didn't have, you know. But so I would go to school for a semester and work nights, or I would not go to school for a semester so I could work, you know, 12-hour days, and I worked in retail. So again, a lot of face-to-face encounters with people where you're selling stuff. You know, so I guess there's an entrepreneurial sort of edge to it. I wouldn't have thought about it, but you know, you're selling because you're working on commission, so you're upselling. This looks great on you. And this matches that. I was very good at it.
So knowing all that hard work, what it took, and you didn't, you know, going to school, working a job, and all that commitment, did that help you start your own business? A lot of people say, well, if you need to start your own business, you got to be willing to just risk it all.
It never dawned on me to start my own business, ever. Never in a million years. Even in high school, I didn't know women business owners. I didn't know any business owner. My dad, all the people my parents knew were reporters or were in the entertainment industry. I didn't know anyone who owned a business. It was not part of, you know, our world in any way, shape, or form. When I went to college, I majored in psychology and figured I'd be a clinical psychologist because I love troubled people. And then I realized that it meant listening to other people for an hour without saying much. And I thought, well, that sucks. I like to talk. That's not going to really work for me.
Right.
But I got a job when I was in college at Channel 50. for both Bill Kennedy, who had a movie talk show, and then Lou Gordon, who had a show that was sort of similar to Tim Skubik's Off the Record. And I really got the bug for TV and worked there, and then at Channel 4 in Detroit. You know, and then worked in the legislature, and then got kind of, you know, for those of you who know the political environment in Lansing, you can be on a political high and then suddenly be the persona non grata. And I was very close to and worked for the First Lady of Michigan at the time, Paula Blanchard, and then she and the governor got a divorce. And even though I was on the governor's payroll and on his staff, because I was close to his soon-to-be ex-wife, probably wasn't a real comfortable place for me to be, to work in the governor's office. So I got moved to a state department, the Department, ironically, of Mental Health, which I thought was like a diagnosis at the time, because I was a single working mom. And I'd been like, you know, sort of booted. Don't get me wrong, I still had a check.
Yeah.
You know, but I'd had some great jobs in state government, and all of a sudden I was in a cubicle, and people I knew were pretending they didn't know me. And so I really, that was the moment where I said, I got to get a plan.
Yeah.
But I made great money. I had great money. I had a great job for a long time before that. I was the state's products promotion director. And I met a guy by the name of Ned Hubble. I don't know if anybody knows him here, but he was a communications professor at MSU and really one of the premier education researchers in the country. He worked for the Department of Education. And he took me under his wing, and he said, PR, you got to go into PR. I'm like, I did not even really know what PR was. And he kind of took me under his wing and said, everything you've been doing for years is PR. And he was right.
Yeah.
And so I totally blindly decided I would be a PR consultant. And the irony is I had applied for a job with the only PR company in town at the time, a company called Publicom. I'd applied there over the years 3 different times, and all 3 times they had failed to see the light, and they had not hired me.
Right.
At no time as I'm thinking about starting my own PR firm did it dawn on me, what the am I doing? The only PR firm in town wouldn't hire me for an entry-level account executive position. What makes me think
That you can do it.
I can do it? So that, to me, I think entrepreneurs are, by intention, really blind to the obvious sometimes. And I think that's a really good thing, because if you think about it, if you worried about all the reasons you should not go into business, trust me, the reasons that you should not go into business generally from a practical perspective are that high. And the reasons to go into business tend to be that high.
It's true, right? Yeah.
If you were to think about the risks, the sacrifices, all the things that are the hardships of owning a business, and the hardships really do outweigh the benefits for a lot of years. If you thought for really any length of time, you wouldn't do it. But for whatever reason, I truly believe that part of the entrepreneur's DNA is total denial of factual reality. I think that's a good thing. I really do. Seriously, how many of you, if you really thought about it and you did what they call a decision tree analysis, would say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Go into debt, work 80 hours a week, never see your family, hustle, 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 not just for work, but to get paid for the work you already did. Try and figure out how you're gonna pay basics like, oh, I don't know, the electric bill. My son once called me, he was about 10.
Yeah.
He called me and he goes, the TV won't go on. I was at work. Okay, let's make sure it's plugged in. And then I remembered, thought I might have a consumer's bill that was sitting around somewhere that hadn't been paid. So I said, because I'm bright this way, go do me a favor and open the refrigerator door and let me know if the light bulb's burned out.
Right?
That was in the day. You cannot pull this off anymore, but that was in the day. Literally, I have no money. I had no money. But that was in the day where you could write a check And it was about 3 or 4 days before it cleared.
Yeah, right.
So I wrote a check, and then I went to clients and, you know, really begged to be paid.
Wow.
You know, and I started my business at a time, and I know this is hard to believe, but it was 1988, and that was the first year that you could put groceries on a credit card. It was the first year you could do that, and that is how I fed my family, my son and I, for a year. So I had Twinkies on my credit card that I was still paying for 4 years later.
And the Twinkies were
They
still
were
good.
still good, yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly,
Right?
yes, exactly.
Well, because that was one of my questions, like, how did you manage your cash flow when you first
What
started?
cash flow? Cash flow implies that there's a flow of cash.
Right?
No such beast. So again, clueless is helpful.
Okay.
So I took out a small loan, and I was telling Dave earlier, the precursor to Fifth Third Bank was Old Kent.
Yep.
And I had donated some time to the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce. They were looking for raffle prizes and stuff. So I said, well, I'll donate 10 hours of public relations service. And Old Kent won 10 hours. And that 10 hours of free service ended up being a 15-year client relationship.
Awesome.
They gave me a $5,000 loan when I had, according to them, many years later, they never told me this at the time, a negative net worth. And I bought an Apple computer,
Yeah.
and I was scared to death of computers. So you have to think about what in 1988, fax machines weren't around yet. They came in about 89, 90.
Mm-hmm.
Cell phones came in about 89, where like regular business people, and they were the size of a car battery. And so it was a really different time. So I bought a computer. I bartered office space. So there was nothing like this. There weren't business people helping other business people. There weren't things like the Hatch or Neo or anything like that where you could go and be with other people trying to start a business and share ideas, share space, share equipment. But I had a friend who worked for an association, and they were buying a building, and they had the second floor that was vacant. And he said, office space, it's great, office space. And so without ever looking at it, I said, well, I'll give you, what's your rent? It was like $500 a month. I was working in my den, but it is not, that was in the days of landlines, and, my house was never cleaner than when I worked at home, because I could find all kinds of other things to do.
Besides work.
And you as an entrepreneur, when you're starting up, you really need connections and other people to bounce ideas off of. There weren't big B's. You didn't go to a coffee shop because, remember, your cell phone was the size of a battery. I mean, the environment in which you're in now did not exist at that time. So I bartered. I said, I'll give you 5 hours of service a month in exchange for the office. Deal. Then I looked at the office. It was pale blue Kmart paneling and gold shag rug from about 72, 73. I got a desk that was all banged up, but I had it for like 20, 25 years. I brought my little computer in, took it out of the box, and sat down and went, what am I doing?
Right.
But I had a friend who was a city councilman, and they were starting a new garbage program, so you can see that I was really in my element. So I got hired to market garbage, which is hard to imagine, but they were doing two things. It was a time when they were switching from garbage can pickup to garbage bags, and you had to buy bags that were the official approved Lansing City bags. And they were also switching they would no longer pick up stuff at the curb, big bulk items, unless you bought a sticker. So it used to be that you could put a couch at the curb in the city of Lansing, and they would pick it up for free, not charge you anything. So they were switching up, and that was, my claim to fame really was garbage and curb pickup, and I've been there ever since.
Well, and then I know that you've partnered with several people along the way.
Yep.
And so was that, is it personality driven? Is it how you look at someone else to know if you want to go it alone or if you want to have a partner? Or how do you determine that?
Well, so my first partner was a guy by the name of Roger Martin. He'd been the bureau chief of the Detroit News. I'd been in business for about 3 years, and I was at a point where I knew that I could only grow so much without having a clone of me, that I needed somebody who was as skilled, as experienced, but I really couldn't afford to pay somebody like that. And I happened to be talking to Roger at a party with a bunch of press people, and it was when the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press were going into their joint agreement, and he was miserable and pissy. And I said, you know, have you ever thought of going into business? And I had no idea the guy had been thinking about it for years. And so we started talking, and you know, we talked later. The first day he started, I'm driving to work going, and our deal was base salary, 10% of any business you bring in, and it was really, really, really important to him to have his name on the door. Really, really, really important. Well, that didn't cost me squat other than business cards, right?
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, get your name on the door, you can be president, and you know, here's your base salary, which was really low, and then you're going to get 10% of anything you bring in. That day that he started, I'm driving in going, and the base salary was 35 grand.
Yeah.
I'm driving into work going, where the, am I ever going to find $35,000 to pay this guy? I found out later he's driving to work going, what did I just do? I just agreed to go work for this company for $35,000 a year, because he was taking a huge pay cut.
Right.
But that's part of the risk. And he and I were partners for several years, and then one Friday afternoon after 5 o'clock, he came into my office, he closed the door, he was white as a ghost, and he said, we have to have a very difficult conversation. And my kids had just left for a trip with their dad, and I thought he was coming in to tell me that my kids had been in a horrible car accident and were dead. And instead, he said, I'm leaving the business, I'm joining forces with somebody else, and you know, I hate to say it, that was like not a big deal, because I thought he was coming in to tell me my kids were dead. It struck me within minutes that it was probably still a pretty big deal,
right,
that a guy whose name was on the door was leaving. And it wasn't like, hey, I want to do something else, like, you know, let's figure out how to exit because we have clients and all this. It was, yeah, we bought a building 6 months ago. I've been fixing it up. It was horrible. I had at that time been divorced twice. It was worse than any divorce I'd ever been through. Didn't see it coming at all. But, you know, shit happens in life. And I really thought seriously it would be so much easier to go work for somebody else and just, you know, no pressure. But there were 8 people working for us. And those 8 people still needed a job on Monday. And I didn't feel like I could let them down. So
right,
we regrouped very carefully. We issued a news release. The name of the company at the time was Rossman, Martin and Associates. We issued a news release saying we were demartinizing because
very cute.
the
very
worst
cute.
time, and you know, you got to use humor, right?
Yeah, right.
It was horrible. It was like the talk of the town. And one of the things I did very deliberately was to make sure that every day I was everywhere that people would be. So I went to the country club for lunch. That was like the days when the country club was a big deal. I made sure I walked through the Capitol every day. I always made sure I was in bold, bright clothes so that people saw a very positive image. It was probably one of the more difficult times because I learned some valuable lessons. One, I didn't have a no-compete contract with him, and I didn't have a confidentiality agreement with him. 2 things that really are cornerstones of business partnerships. But he was someone I trusted, and it never dawned on me in a million years that I would need a no-compete or a confidentiality agreement with my partner. And I had over time given him 12.5% of the business. And so there was, I mean, it was definitely a very, very difficult time. It was an expensive time because the legal protection I had to put into place for a couple of my clients, because he actually went out and worked for competitors of the clients we had. Legal fees were well in excess of $25,000. And I didn't see it coming. And one of the things I learned from that experience was to, always protect yourself, trust but verify, and make sure that you've got all the legal documents you need. If your partner doesn't have really the same moral compass, if they don't have the same passion for the work, and what I realized is that he had a passion for the rewards of the work, the financial rewards, where I'm like, don't get me wrong, I love money. I think it's great. It can buy you a lot of stuff. It may not buy happiness, but you're going to look damn good even if you're unhappy. But I love the work. I love the work. And he really, the money was more important to him. So for many, many years, I ran the business by myself. And then John Truscott, a friend of mine who had a firm that was he started it about 10 years after I'd started mine. We were having dinner one night, and we were sort of, kind of commiserating and, really bitching about employees and bitching about clients, and really pretty much bitch session, much like you probably have among yourselves. But we were both talking about what we wanted in terms of, in an ideal world. He wanted an office in Grand Rapids. And I said, that'd be great. I said, I'd like an office in Detroit, be statewide. And we figured the only way we could do that was join forces. So I said, we really ought to join forces. And then we laughed, and that was it. And he called me about a week or two later. He was driving up north, and he said, I just can't stop thinking about it. I just can't stop thinking about what we could do together. And so we started talking about the downsides of a partnership. And because we have been accustomed to being sole proprietors, the things that were of greatest concern to us were exactly the same things. I don't want anybody to question what car I drive. I don't want anybody to question how much time I take off. I want somebody who has the same commitment to the work. And so we started joining forces. And what do you suppose the first thing I did was? Call an attorney. So when he and I joined forces, we had a meeting with his accountant, my accountant, his attorney, my attorney, his divorce attorney, because he was going through a divorce, and then an attorney that represented the new entity that we were going to create, and then the COO I had just hired, who'd been on the job for about 2 weeks, and then suddenly found out he wasn't really going to, his first job as COO was to create a brand new business. And that 2-hour meeting probably cost $2,000 just in terms of hourly fees, but it was, we had a strong, not only foundation, but all the legal documentation to protect each of us as individuals, and then each of our assets and the corporate entity.
That's an awesome story. I think we can all learn from that.
Accountants and attorneys.
Yeah, trust and verify, right?
And attorneys.
Trust and verify.
Yeah, trust and verify. It really, trust and verify.
But for you to go into business with someone and then have it checked, but then to have a gut feeling like, okay, I think I can do this again with a different person. I think trusting your gut instinct is probably, do you give that a lot of credit?
Oh yeah, in fact, some of the dumbest things I've done have been because I didn't trust my gut. I second guessed it. I used my head instead of my heart. Don't get me wrong, you have to use your head. But if you don't trust your gut, you're doing something wrong. My husband, who's here, is a law enforcement officer. And he says that, the hackles go back, go up on the back of his neck when something's kind of not right. That's a gut instinct. That is telling you something's hinky.
Right.
And if you don't trust your gut, you're doing something wrong. I think your gut always tells you the best place to be.
Well, I know you're operating on all cylinders, but what's your like pie in the sky kind of, where do you want to take?
Retirement. I would really like to kick back and concentrate more on the business itself. So in a service industry, let me back up. I think there are really two kinds of business owners. There are business owners like me who are in business because they have passion for the work it is they do. Mm-hmm. And then there are business owners like Chris Holman, who owns all kinds of companies that don't even actually relate to each other. He doesn't actually make all that stuff. He loves the business itself. He likes the financials. He's a back of the house guy in terms of running a business. I would like to be in a position where I had more time to do that. I still love the client work, but it's very demanding. I'm on the road all the time. I'm in Detroit quite a bit. John's in Grand Rapids quite a bit, and it's, you know, it's a grind. Mm-hmm. And my kids are all grown up, and you know, actually I like them better now that they don't live at home, but one of the things I really wish I'd done was chill out a little bit more. But as an entrepreneur, a working mom who all of your income is driven by what it is you hunt and catch, you know, I didn't chill out for a long time. Mm-hmm. Actually, not till I got Xanax, and that is awesome. So,
just saying.
Just saying, yeah.
So do you think that there was that little voice in the back of your head, or someone really supporting you, saying, I see something in you, Kelly, that you don't quite see, and then supporting you through the entrepreneur, like doing the PR thing,
yeah.
like he saw something in you?
Well, so Ned Hubble, like I said, was the guy who really kind of took me under his wing. But one of the things I did was when I knew that my career politically was kind of a dead end. But anyone in the political environment in Lansing also knows this too shall pass. If you're a rising star in one administration, mm-hmm. and then you get iced, there's going to be another. You're going to be there long after the administration has turned over. You're going to be fine. But I am not a sit in your cubby and read a paperback kind of a gal. That's just not me. So what I did was sit down and have lunch or coffee or breakfast with about 20 different people in Lansing who I had a lot of respect for. Mm-hmm. And they were people who all knew the position I was in. And I asked them, what should I do? Should I just wait it out? Should I go? Should I move? Do I need to go somewhere else? 2 out of those 20 people said, you should do that PR thing you do. And I'm like, PR thing I do? What is that? What PR thing do I do? And that's when I kind of sought out Ned Hubble. I knew he was a PR guru, and I said, what's this PR thing I do? What is that? And he started showing me that everything I'd really done career-wise had all been building blocks to public relations. But I never took a PR class in school. I guest speaker all the time in PR classes, and the first thing I tell the kids is, I didn't ever take a class, so you're way ahead of me already, but let me tell you what the real world is like. But I never took a class. Probably would have been a good idea, but never did.
Well, for people that are starting out, do you say to them, you got to be willing to just risk it all?
Yes. You totally have to be willing to risk it all.
Yeah.
You totally, if you are not willing to risk it all, you're really not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You might be somebody who's willing to dabble, but if you're not really willing to risk it all, don't do it. Because that's what it is. It's your heart and soul. That is what running a business really is. And if you think that running a business is all about being your own boss, well, it is, but it sucks being your own boss because it turns out you're a slave driver. A business owner serves his or her customers, right? Well, your customers need stuff. And they don't want to wait around. They don't care that your kid has a soccer game. They don't care that, you know, you've got another, they don't care. And so I really did literally work 80 hours a week for years. My son, who's now 37, was 10 when I started, and I was a single working mom. It was this was our only income. And, you know, I would go home, pick him up, and we would go back to work, and he would eat pizza at the conference table. Wasn't my conference table, by the way. I'm just saying, there was a conference table, it wasn't mine. And then I would do my work and he would do his homework. And that was our life for a really long time. Yeah. You know, and he, I think, looks back on it, I don't know how much with fondness, but he realizes he got to do a lot of cool things. Yeah. You know, because I would schlep him everywhere. I would take him everywhere because I couldn't afford a babysitter.
But so we all love Alex. I mean, he would just be this cutest little guy.
Yeah. He's a grown-up now, sure. I know. I mean, he's a grown-up. Yeah. But for years, he was embarrassed that, you know, that I would schlep him around. And he years later, he was a press secretary for the Senate Democrats, and he realized being related to me actually opened doors with, you know, news directors, reporters, et cetera. So suddenly it was cool to be Alex Rossman.
You bet.
Whoa.
Your mom
isn't Kelly's son?
Right,
yeah.
Right. It helps.
And he said he used to say,
So obviously, statewide, that's something that's happened within the last few years, really since JT.
Yes and no. Because I'd worked with the Blanchard administration, I had always done different projects around the state, so I knew people around the state. Mm-hmm. And so I had done a little bit of work here and there, but yeah, we've had an office in Detroit for 2.5 years. We've had an office in Grand Rapids for 4 years. We had a big event last night. We do a thing called Wonderful Women, and we started it in Grand Rapids. And you know, we market our firm. We don't advertise really, but we do a couple things. Dave mentioned it. We underwrite off the record. We've underwritten off the record for more than 25 years. We do a punchki party every year on Fat Tuesday, and we invite hundreds of people. We do a lobby guide, which is a directory of lobbyists. It's the only one anywhere like it in the country. We do a wall calendar every year that's totally irreverent and highly sought after. And now we do Wonderful Women. We do a big party and invite every woman we know to thank them for opening doors, welcoming us to the community in Grand Rapids, where it's hugely successful. We had 120 women at our last event in March. In Detroit last night, our very first event, we had 350 women.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was cool.
Great, congrats.
It was cool. So we do a lot of cool
tapped
stuff.
Some of the top women in the area?
We tapped everybody. The top women, we had a lot of young women who are just graduating from Wayne State's public relations program. It was wonderful. And one of the things that several women told us was, I've never seen this interesting, eclectic mix of women, and that was the goal.
Well, truly, because when I was first starting, I didn't have a female mentor at all. I mean, pretty much everybody was male, and it's interesting that you're saying the same thing. So hopefully you have mentors, someone that you can reach out to and talk to. And mentoring is and hopefully now we're reaching back to the generation, the 20-year-olds, the 30, which you are. So don't you think—
The 20-year-olds? Yes, I am a 20-year-old. Yeah, I like that.
Don't you think that mentoring is important?
Yeah, it's, I would never formalize it as much. You know, mentoring sounds like it's a formal program. It's basically wrapping your arm around somebody, being a shoulder to cry on, somebody to say, okay, what do I do now? I mean, all of my mentors were men. Yeah. And I think that's, again, my generation. I like to think that most of I try really hard, especially to help young women starting in business. I'm very active in Athena Win, as you are, to really help women. But I don't think women have as much of a challenge now as we did, 20, 30 years ago. I think it's much more accepted that a woman can succeed in business just as easily, or it's difficult. I make it sound just as easily as men can. It's a piece of cake, right?
But David, one of the subjects that he brought up, it said 60% of new Michigan businesses are started by women.
Well, yeah, as it should be. Why do you suppose that is? I can tell you why in the Detroit area.
Okay.
And that is that women who have retired as teachers, as police officers, as city employees, they are in their mid-50s and they are looking for their encore degree or encore career. They have a pension and they can afford to take a risk.
Okay.
And I've seen it time and time again. There are huge startups among women in Detroit, and I was asking, why is that? That just doesn't make sense to me. And that's why.
Interesting.
They've got this nest egg and they're ready to do something else, where a lot of men who retire are like, okay, I'm good, let's go golf.
I'm done, right? Very good.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been great, and we can keep going, but we have about 15 minutes left, so I'd really like, and I have other questions, but I'd really like to open the floor to you if you have anything that you'd like to ask Kelly. Go ahead, in the front row.
Over here.
Oh.
Over here.
Okay, good. Oh, this is like TV. Get to be on, say your name, talking to the microphone.
Just like TV.
That's right.
Oh, she's got notes. Look at that. I got my iPad. I wrote my question down.
We only have 15 minutes.
Step it up, girlfriend. Come on.
That's right. Line up.
I know. Okay, so I thank you both for being here, first of all, and I have a ton of questions, but I'll start with one if I get to the back of the line and make my way forward
We're
again.
hanging out after.
But my first one was actually a question for both of you. How do you decide about your name brand as a woman, as you make decisions maybe to get married and to start that different chapter in your life? How do you make that decision about what you're going to do as far as your name brand goes when your name is kind of who you are and what you do?
Wow.
That's a good one.
Well, okay, so especially, and Sherry's really the same way. You're kind of marketing yourself, right? I don't know about Sherry, but I am a very transparent person. I mean, what you see really is me. I just don't have any secrets because I can't keep them. So, I'll just tell you everything. But the things that might be like a flaw, a character flaw, I'm very upfront with them. I've been married 3 times. My fabulous third husband, proving that the third time is indeed a charm. Deputy Dave is sitting right here, and I owe him everything. This guy is amazing. Because I discovered I wasn't really great at marriage, and you just have to be honest about stuff that are flaws. I actually think it's, to survive 2 marriages and then be willing to do it again. I don't think that's a flaw. I think that's an asset. My God, try again, for crying out loud. Right. But
see, I love it. You two are great together. You are.
But so the marketing stuff I told you about, we do fun stuff. That's marketing our brand. Our brand is fun stuff. It's the Punchki Party. It's Wonderful Women. It's an irreverent calendar. It's just cool, fun stuff that takes you nobody else does it. And that's kind of, I don't know how deliberate that brand is, that it's deliberate so much as it's just consistent with our overall philosophy of being fun.
But when she says heart and soul, it's truly that it's reflected in everything that she does and says, in her humor and her style, and it's her brand. But she's done a great job with that and stayed true to that. Didn't really. I think that's really what you have to do. I've been blessed to be 25 years behind the anchor desk now. I started when I was 10. So but you have to be true to your integrity, your ethics, your style. You can't let trends or I'd rather be right than first. These are things that are core values of when you start. And as things change around you and pressure, and you just have to stay who you are. So a lot of people see you on TV and think, is that, but I'm more fun than I am on TV because TV is really very serious and dark, but people don't always see me smile except when I do talk to sports and maybe a little bit of the weather. So, but that you have to stay true to who you are, because you can't be someone else, because then you're trying to remember, and I've never played that game. So be centered on who you are, that brand of who you are, and if it's true, it will last 35 years, 25 years in a highly competitive, cutthroat, narcissistic environment, because I just don't care about that. So in knowing when you want to start a family, it takes a lot of balance. It takes a very good partner, because we're super committed and super involved and work nonstop and work on anniversaries and birthdays and holidays and nights and weekends, but it's what we do, it's what we love. So you have to stay committed to that. Legally, I am my husband's last name, but professionally, I started in the business before I was married, and I just kept that. And it's kind of nice for the kids, because then they have their own identity until, they get pulled over, and then they have to say, well, my mom, Sherry, jumps out. And then they get a ticket anyway.
Crime stoppers.
Right. So my advice to you is, along the journey, I'd say 20s and 30s, it's really good to just kind of develop who you are and your brand and get your things going, and then make sure that that person in your life fits with you in that. And then your kids in 30s and 40s, and then 50s, then you're really starting to blossom, and then 60s, still blossoming, and then choosing when you want to just say, I'm here, I can do this, and then go and have fun. So that's kind of the way I look at it. That's how I'm trying to do it. Yeah.
Hi. You do crisis management, I think I heard you say. So I really have like 3 questions, so, but I think they'll be fun. One is, what is your best accomplishment in that?
In crisis?
You pulled it out, but everybody was against you, and yet you won the day, and it was the right thing. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, what's the biggest train wreck where you were wrong and it was bad? And then what's your biggest train wreck where it was oh my gosh, how did we possibly come out on top? We did it all wrong, or we had no idea what we were really facing, that sort of thing. So those 3 sort of situations.
So I can tell you, I can answer those 3 questions, and I'm going to use the same client all 3 times. So years ago, there was a company that eventually became Bioport and then Emergent Biosolutions. They make the anthrax vaccine, and it was part of state government. And I am talking probably late 90s. The Engler administration was spinning off this agency that made the anthrax vaccine. And I got hired by a group of people that were bidding on buying the agency. That was at a time when anthrax, if you Googled anthrax, you got the heavy metal band. Nobody knew what anthrax was at all. They'd never heard of it. And the first challenge was this group of people were made up of Admiral William Crowe, who'd been the chairman of the United Forces. What's he called, babe? Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, something like that. He's a big shooter. And a businessman whose name was Fuad El-Hebri, and then a group of state employees who worked for the agency. And the first challenge was convincing people that having this group as the buyer was going to protect and preserve the jobs in the company in Lansing. So that was job number 1, and a state senator, then Ling Brewer, the local state senator, was vehemently opposed to this group. He said they were insiders because they'd worked in the agency. So we portrayed them as the hometown team who were going to really keep them hometown. And the crisis really was, they were buying this company at a time when Bill Clinton, who was a friend of Admiral Crowe's, had mandated the anthrax vaccine for every member of the armed services. And there were accusations that that was a backdoor deal to increase the profits of the Admiral's new company. In addition, there was a great deal of controversy related to the effectiveness of the vaccine and also the side effects of the vaccine, and there were national stories. I was the spokesperson for the company. at a time when it was run by a bunch of scientists, and I did not do well in biology, and so I had a crash course. So our crisis was ultimately, we came up with a slogan that they still use today. It's the world's only FDA-approved anthrax vaccine. I did everything. I wrote congressional testimony. I was the spokesperson. I talked with national network reporters, all that. And we got past that crisis because we were very deliberate about sticking with the message. And I did something that...
You worked for the company that was selling?
I worked for the company, well, it wasn't, it was a state agency. I worked for the group of people that ultimately bought, they were successful in their bid and bought the company. So the smartest thing I did was to increase my credibility as a spokesperson, because the biggest criticism was that the vaccine was dangerous. Well, if you're a FLAC, a spokesperson, and you're saying the vaccine is safe, but you've never taken the vaccine, you're just a FLAC. And I felt really strongly that I needed to enhance my credibility. So I asked if I could take the vaccine. And the company is like, what the, have you not read? You know, we love you, but have you not read this? And I'm like, well, yeah, but I believe everything you're telling me. And they had to go to the U.S. Department of Defense to make sure, because I wasn't vital to the company.
Right.
I thought I was. I thought, yeah, hell yes, I'm vital. So I've had 4 doses of the anthrax vaccine. And one of the things I saw, and it was really quite amazing. I was in the middle of what's called a media scrum, where the reporters are kind of surrounding you after a congressional hearing, and they were talking about the side effects. And there were protesters kind of around as well. And I said, well, I've had 4 doses of the vaccine myself, and you could hear, boom, dead silence, including among the protesters. So that's one crisis. Same group now, same group. You want the shit's hitting the fan, right? Don't tell a lot of people this story, but there was an employee death at Bioport, a guy who worked in the lab, and he had several health issues. So, you know, all kinds of, you know, just he was not a very healthy man. And on his death certificate, the Ionia County medical examiner, who was a part-time medical examiner who I'm pretty sure worked in his kitchen, had written that he'd recently had the anthrax vaccine, and so he thought that the death could be attributed at least in part to the anthrax vaccine. Now, I heard about it not from my client, but from a reporter at the State Journal who had been called by somebody, AJ Evanson. I don't know if you remember AJ. And I went, oh, let me find out, can you sit on it for a day? Sit on it for a day, I'm not gonna tell anybody else. And I found out enough, you know, I found out that yes, indeed, the medical death certificate actually said that. And so we lined up, and this was in less than 24 hours. We lined up the medical examiner in Kent County. We lined up the physician who oversaw all of the vaccine work, and we got the 3 top scientists in the company. And we pulled a news conference together for the next morning. And because the bottom line in crisis communications is, if you know the shit's gonna hit the fan, turn the fan off as goddamn fast as you possibly can. So get out in front of the story, right? So I'm thinking, brilliant, we're out in front of the story, this is great, we got reporters coming up, we've done this at 10 o'clock in the morning, we've called reporters at night so they can all get there, right? Brilliant, this is gonna be awesome, except I forgot to do the following. Media train the 3 frickin' scientists who are gonna be talking to reporters. And literally, there was a Keystone Cops moment, literally, 3 scientists, all of whom are brilliant, not really what we call made for TV. There's a question, and it was one of the obvious questions. I had not prepped these guys. I mean, they know their stuff. I've talked with them, they know their stuff, but they froze in front of, I mean, froze. It was like they didn't even know how to talk. And at one time, and I'm sitting in the back going, mother, I cannot. And I'm like, I got to dust off my resume. Where are my car keys? There's a question, and these are three brilliant men. And they're sitting at a table like this, all these press people. There's some basic question, and it was like this. Well, I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. Do you know? It was horrible. Total shit show. I mean, it was a total shit show. And luckily, the reporters went with the news and not the total shit show. And then I issued a news release getting quotes from these guys. And I was lucky because, number one, I had a great rapport with the media. I still have a really good relationship with as many reporters as I can because they're my bread and butter. And they trusted me, respected me, and knew that we had done the best we could under the circumstances. But really, 3 things, all with one client, and they're not a client anymore. I don't know that there's a relationship there or not. I'm kidding. Yeah.
Okay.
Last one. I'm sticking around, though.
So when you see a young entrepreneur
Yeah.
and they're starting up, are there certain traits that you see in them that you go, yes, you're gonna go, or nope, you should quit now? Are there certain things that you see that stand out to you?
First is the passion for the business. It's really the passion for the business, excitement about what it is you do. When I met you tonight, you can see that. You wear that passion on your face. And another small world story, I sit on the Women's Foundation Microloan Committee, and we've given her a loan. I'd never met her before, but we gave her a loan. I recognize your business and everything. So it's passion, but it's also really understanding, your business. So like you and I were talking about, you can tell people understand their business and nuts and bolts of their business. But first and foremost, it's passion for what it is you do. Because if you don't have the passion, you're never going to be able to tolerate the sacrifices you have to make as a business owner. You're just not. So you better find the passion or go work for somebody else. I mean, it's really that simple. One more. Come on, give the guy a chance, for crying out loud.
I was taking orders from the boss, I'm sorry.
I didn't want to have to hit the Xanax when I got home. I'm Gary. I have a couple of questions. I'm just driving in from Grand Rapids early tonight. I had a couple of objectives I was thinking about, aside from hearing Kelly's stories about being an overnight success. The other one was to meet, I have not met Miss Jones, Rocco's, my friend.
Oh,
So we'll talk about
very nice.
Rocco later. And
Great.
have you met Miss Jones before? We'll tell you that later.
Okay.
Rocco didn't play the song for you yet?
No.
Oh, geez, I just blew it. Okay. Kelly,
Yes.
if you don't know this, maybe Sherry can fill you in, but it's kind of a serious question. I was driving by the airport about a week ago to meet somebody, and I saw a billboard, and it was a picture of a guy with a beard. And I don't know if this is a sign of the apocalypse or what, but it said, "Listen to Todd." And then a lovely young lady about a mile later had another billboard, and it said, "Listen to somebody." I forget.
Cindy.
Was it, oh, Cindy.
Cindy.
Oh. Is that supposed to mean something that we're supposed to pick up
So
on?
in the Lansing area, if you work in politics, you don't have to hear Courser to know that that's Todd Courser. And you don't have to hear Gamrat to know that that's Cindy Gamrat. And a radio station in Detroit, a minority-owned station, by the way, 920 AM, has a number of, it's a radio talk show station, and they have a number of interesting personalities. Christine Beatty, who was Mayor Kilpatrick's love interest and chief of staff, is a radio talk show host. Todd Courser, former state representative who had an affair with Cindy Gamrat, and they each have their own radio show. Now, first of all, the station does not reach Lansing. duh. So why they're doing billboard advertising in Lansing, I have no idea, especially when it's number one, a minority station that primarily appeals to the African American community in Detroit. Number two, there's not a frickin' soul in Lansing in the political world who would ever once listen to Todd Corser or Cindy Gamrat. So it's a really interesting thing. They're putting a lot of money into it unless they brokered some kind of a deal with Adams Outdoor. But that's, I mean, even then you got to pay production, and production on an outdoor billboard is about what? $2,000, something like that. So I don't know. But here's what's interesting. You guys have probably never heard of 920 AM, and now we're talking about it in a market that they don't even really play in. And there are stories about them in political circles. So anybody who's in and around Detroit is now starting to tune in to 920 AM just to see what the station's all about. So it may be brilliant marketing. It's an odd marketing strategy, but it may well be brilliant.
Somebody flies into Lansing and goes to the state capitol and says, what is this?
What the hell?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we have one question to wrap things up.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is, what do you want to be remembered for? We ask all of our guests here at the Startup Grind.
For?
What would you like to be remembered for?
That's a great question. I just think, you know, having fun and being ballsy.
Okay.
I mean, right?
Right.
There you go.
All right.
Should we put that on my tombstone, honey? She had fun. Oh, by the way, she was ballsy.
Right. I like it.